Hey everybody, Andre here, and today we're gonna go on Reddit because that's apparently what YouTube people do. And we're gonna just check out the music theory subreddit and see what we find. By the way, if you know what piece this is, I think this shirt is pretty fun. So if you know what piece this is, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. All right, let's do this thing. There's nothing that fascinates me more in this world than improv. I mean, yeah, improv is pretty amazing. You know, people think that improv is only delegated to jazz musicians, but improv can be done in all genres, and I really think that, it's the cleanest and purest way of just expressing your emotion in the real time. And if you want to know more about how I approach improv, there is going to be a link in the description below about a video that I did on improv. So go ahead and check that out. Minor triad with a major seventh. Hi, I'm in a bit of a conundrum. If I'm writing a seventh chord in A harmonic minor, which begins on the tonic, it seems that I'm forced to write a minor triad and then major seventh to fit the G sharp in. This has left me quite confused, as I don't think this is an actual chord. Or am I doing something completely wrong? First of all, any series of notes, whether it be this or whether it be this, they're both chords. Okay, so let's dispel that really quickly. It is a chord. Now, A harmonic minor, we have A minor triad, and then if you add the seventh, that's just a really cool chord, man. In my classroom, I call this the minor major seventh because it says that the minor triad along with the major seventh. I also like to call this the James Bond chord. And scrolling through the comments here, somebody actually says, ask James Bond. So good job there. So yes, it's an actual chord. In Roman numerals, I would write minor 1, minor, major 7. What do I label this? How do I label, when working in Roman numerals, a B diminished seventh chord in the key of E flat major? Okay, so in the key of E flat major, the note B is actually supposed to be flat, right? So this chord is going to be chromatic, meaning it's outside of the key of E flat major. So whatever Roman numeral you use to describe it should show its chromatic nature. So a B diminished seventh is I guess he didn't say whether it's fully diminished or half diminished, but in any case, the first thing that I would think of is, well, number one, it's chromatic chord. Number two, it's a diminished chord. So that means it's a leading tone chord. And leading tone chords in Roman numeral land like to have function. And so the root of a leading tone chord leads to the chord that it sets up. So what does B lead to? A half step up from B is C. What's C in the key of E flat? It is the 6th scale degree. So C minor is 6 in the key of E flat, meaning that the B diminished, whether it's fully diminished or half diminished, it's still going to be 7 diminished of 6. That is how I would do it. Scrolling through some of these comments, there's some real misinformation going on here, like people saying flat 6, diminished 7. Not really true, because B is not flat 6. B is really the sharp 5. And you might say that, well, isn't that the same thing? In music theory, a lot of the times you have to go by what's written on the page, because oftentimes it's written on the page for a reason. So be careful with that. But yes, it is a 7 of 6. What's the key to this chord progression? The chord progression is A major, C major, and G major. It seems like it should be simple, but I don't know. So A major, C major, G major. Well, it kind of depends on what key you're in. So it sounds like we're living in a G kind of world. And the A chord is a little chromatic. So if we're living in this world, I can't help but hear it. It's not really tonal harmony in the sense of like standard function. But if we were to assign Roman numerals classically, I would probably say this is a, well, G is 1, of course, C is 4, but the A is probably a 5 of 5, right? Because the A is the fifth of D, which is the 5 chord in G. But it's kind of tricky because it doesn't actually go to D. But that's what I would do. I would assign 5 of 5, 4, 1. It's tough because we're taking this out of context. You know, what music are we dealing with here? I mean, maybe we're living in a kind of different world here. Maybe we're actually in the key of A major with a flat 3 and a flat 7. But I don't, when I play this, if I'm just jamming, I hear it landing in G. So that's what I would say. I'd say this is a 5 of 5 to 4 to a 1 in the key of G, but it needs more context. As a 15-year-old, where do I start to understand music theory? Gosh, that is such a good question. I mean, I would say that the very first thing that you should do is grab an instrument if you haven't done so already. Harmonic instruments tend to give you the best leg up on learning theory, I'd say. Like, so some kind of instrument that you can play multiple notes on, like a piano or guitar or an organ, you know, something like that, something that you can play multiple notes on. Even certain string instruments, you know, violin, cello, you can still play chords on those instruments. So try to pick up one of those, and honestly, just try to read as much music as possible and try to listen to as much music as possible. So at 15, the first thing that I would not do, I wouldn't go to a textbook, you know, because as a 15-year-old, unless you're really into that kind of academic approach, that's probably going to not, it's not going to carry your interest as much as something like listening to some awesome music would be. So that's the first thing that I would do. I would listen to a bunch of music. I would read music and try to sight read stuff. And even if you make mistakes, that's okay. But actually getting the reading of the sheet music under your belt at an early age is great, is really important. And then after that, if you feel like you're ready, you know, there's a lot of different tools out there. I really love to recommend musictheory.net, for example. You go on there, you do some exercises, you check that out, yeah, you can just build your musicianship skills from the ground up. I mean, I didn't start to do music theory until AP theory in high school, really, and just we were very systematic. You know, we learned the fundamentals first, the fundamentals of reading music, you know, intervals, chords, rhythms, and then went from there. And yeah, the actual theory stuff, even chromatic chords, which is really fundamentals, but like the function of chords within some kind of musical framework, I didn't start dealing with that until college. So at 15, you got plenty of time. Just listen to a bunch of music, sight read a bunch of music, and start to get those fundamentals under your belt. Jazz chord transcribing advice. Hey all, I've been branching out from mostly blues and rock songs into more jazz, and I was wondering if anybody had some advice for transcribing chords. Right now I'll try to find the root. I'll try major minor, some jazzy extensions that I know, and then eventually try to add in specific notes. It's been going slowly, and I've been getting poor results when I check with the tab. Hoping somebody has some tips, or if it's something that just takes time and practice to get better at. I'm sorry to say that unless your ear is perfect and you just can just do these things totally naturally without breaking too much of a sweat, the real answer is that it just takes time. You need to develop your ear, know what to listen for, and just practice, 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 practice. So it sounds like you're already on the right path. You know, try to find the root. That's always my first piece of advice. You know, get the chord, try to get as many notes as possible, and see if you can arrange them so that you can find the root of the chord. See if you can get the tertian harmony first. What I mean by that is like the thirds. So find the root, find the third, find the fifth. If there is a seventh, find that. And then after that, see if you can pinpoint those extension notes. But really, there's no easy way to do it, I don't think. Really just listening over and over again. Slowing it down, it depends on how you're listening to the track, but if you can get some way to slow the track down so that you can kind of, you can hear things a little bit more clearly, a little bit more slowly, that would be a good idea. And just doing it on repeat, and just keep checking and keep checking. And by the way, take tabs with a grain of salt. You know, they might not be right all the time. Just keep doing what you're doing about 10,000 more times, and you'll get it. So don't despair. Just keep going. Can someone explain why this chord progression works, please? G major to G sharp diminished 7 to A minor to D7. Why does it work? What key would it be in? Could someone also explain how G sharp diminished 7 chord tones work? The double F sharp is throwing me off. Would it act as a G note passing into the A minor, and that's why those two chords go well with each other? Also, could you write it out in Roman numerals, please? G major, fantastic. G sharp diminished 7, A minor, then D7. This is a classic progression. So in the key of G, the G chord, of course, is 1, tonic. The A chord is the supertonic, minor 2, and D7 is 5, 5/7, the dominant, and then G. So figure out those diatonic chords first. So we have G, we have A, we have D, right? They're inside of the key. G sharp, however, is not in the key, so it's a chromatic chord. And what you are saying, so well, like that sounds really weird. So what would it be? So G sharp, B, D, and then F natural would be the notes. So you said F double sharp. That's just a wrong note. Sorry. It's not an F double sharp. If you said F double sharp, that's a G, and this chord would sound like this. Which sounds awesome. But that is not a G sharp diminished chord. That's something else. That is a G sharp diminished triad with a major seventh. So, not quite. But F natural is correct. And all that is a 7 diminished 7 of 2. Because the G sharp leads to A, which is what the next chord is. So, one chord, 7 diminished 7 of 2, 2, 5, 7, 1. There you go. Yeah, F double sharp, just not the right note. Sorry. But I hope that helps. Classification of intervals. Is there a category for simple intervals between two notes, second, third, fourth, etc., without getting into major, minor, perfect, etc.? I'm teaching a class and want to know if there's a bucket that all of these intervals fall under. Fall into a bucket. The literal text from my lecture is, we can start by naming the intervals between two notes. For instance, the interval between a C and a D would be a second, between a C and an E would be a third, etc. I'm just calling them simple intervals, but don't think that's the correct classification. So I have a lot of things to say about this. First of all, simple interval traditionally means that it is an interval that is an octave or less. So it's some kind of distance between two notes. You have that part right. Anything that's over an octave is called a compound interval, because it's basically a version of the same interval, except there's 7 extra notes between those two notes. So for example, like a ninth is really just a second, but there's 7 more notes between them. And like a fourth and an 11th, they're basically the same thing, except there's extra notes. And then with each octave you go, you would add another 7 notes. Okay, now the category that you're saying, you want to avoid using major, minor, perfect. Why avoid that? Because a major second and a minor second, they're radically different things. So if you just lump them into one unit, you're doing your students a serious disservice. I mean, you can get to a certain point by saying, yes, this is a third. Being able to quickly, read the lines on a staff, or identify the distance between two notes in a simple way, there is a lot of use to that. But then you're not getting the full story. Some kind of way to identify the quality of the sound, like a major third and a minor third. If you just said, hey, it's the same thing, they're both thirds. I mean, listen to it. It's different. So I don't think that it would be wise for you to continue teaching without going into those details, because you're just going to do your students a disservice. Sorry. Is there a trick to remembering which chords are in each key? Do you really have to memorize each of the 7 chords in every key, or is there a simpler way to go about it? Yes, there is a simpler way to go about it, but you do still have to memorize some stuff. Step number 1 is know what notes are in the scale that you're playing. So if you're dealing with a major scale, it's going to be whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's it, right? So every single major scale is going to have that, okay? All of them. For minor scales, it's a little bit more complicated because there's 3 kinds of minor scales. There's the natural minor, there's the harmonic minor, and there's the melodic minor. They're all basic little versions of each other, but let's stick with major for a moment, okay? So if you have your notes of a major scale memorized, if you know your circle of fifths, then you know all of your major scales. You'll know what accidentals to put on them. So let's say, for example, we're just going to choose A major, okay? So if I was to play all the white keys from A to A, that doesn't sound major to me, right? But if you know your key signatures, you'll know that A major has 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So you just plug them in. C sharp, F sharp, G sharp, A. There's your A major scale. So what you're memorizing is basically the circle of fifths and what accidentals are being added to each of those scales. So I'll give you another example. D flat major. Okay, if I just go from D to D, white keys, that doesn't sound major or minor. It's a Dorian scale, right? But if you add the accidentals of D flat major, we got B flat, we got E flat, we have A flat, we have D flat, we have G flat. 5 flats. You plug them in. D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, and D flat. Now that's a D flat major scale, and all you did was memorize those accidentals and then apply them to those notes between D and D. So how do you remember the chords? Well, in tonal music, in functional harmony anyway, we have certain chords that line up when you start to add thirds. So let's go back to C major, for example. We have C major, and each of these chords is going to be created just by stacking thirds in the scale. Right? That is what happens when you just create those thirds within the C major scale. There's no accidentals. You're just skipping notes, right? C, skip a note, E, skip a note, G. And you just follow that pattern. So the chords that happen are major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. That's the same for every single major key. Every one. Every last one of them. Major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7. Forever and ever, amen. Okay? So, do you have to memorize all 7 chords in every key? No. Do you have to memorize the accidentals in whatever key? Yeah. So, yes, you have to memorize something, but it's actually not as hard as it sounds. Just know your circle of fifths, and then you'll be on your way. All right, last one. I find this one amusing. Remember, it's called music theory, not music law. That is all. Yes. Music theory is a way that people can talk about music. You're figuring out ways to describe what you hear in the music and see if you can trace trends throughout similar kinds of musics and see if there are patterns that emerge, things that keep happening, things that where are the patterns broken and stuff like that. So yes, music theory is not music law. If you're composing just because it's not something that Bach would have done, who cares, right? Bach's been dead a while. He's not going to get mad at you for doing whatever you want. So yeah, not law. However, this does not excuse you from not learning your music theory fundamentals, which I just really should call music fundamentals. And I have another video about that that I'll link below, but basically music literacy and music theory are not the same thing. So a C major chord is a C major chord. That's not a theory. That's just what it is. Okay? An F sharp major scale has those notes in it. That's not a theory. That's just a thing. So don't confuse theory and, fundamental music skills and knowledge, because they're often blurred together into one entity, but they're just not. So, all right, we're going to revisit Reddit another time, but I hope you found this enjoyable. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you thought this was absolutely ridiculous. Remember, if you know what piece this is, go ahead and link it in. Go ahead and talk about it in the comments below. But until next time, goodbye.